Hello, welcome to another episode of Yummy Data Science. In this episode, we are going to be talking about professional claims, or as CMS refers to them, carrier claims, and we are going to be creating a data model using Pandas. Two things I want to note here. I have been posting videos about each setting of healthcare claims. So whether it's inpatient, outpatient, pharmacy, and then, enrollment is administrative healthcare data. So I've been posting these videos and I've been posting videos on how to create a data model using Pandas. Now, corporations have teams working on this, carefully architecting it, ingesting the data, transforming it, and they have teams working on it for weeks. And what I've done is, for teaching purposes, I've made a lot of simplifying assumptions, but I've spent only a handful of hours on each setting. So please forgive my simplifying assumptions and please take it for what it is. It's a teaching exercise. It's my way of imparting my knowledge and experience and what I'm really interested and passionate about to you. Of course, in real practice, there would be more complications and it would take a lot more time. So, having said that, well, we are going to be creating a data model of professional career claims. And a data model is simply a blueprint or a map for organizing the data. And the data model could be a virtual thing. It exists in sort of the technical memory, but or it could be a physical layer in your data warehouse. But whatever it is, you will see two tables at the end of this. And so out of the claims data for professional claims, you'll see diagnosis, which will have the patient and the year and the patient's diagnosis for that year and the description. And then you'll have the encounters. And in the encounters, you'll have things like amount and what was the diagnosis code. And these concepts were previously explained in a video called Key Elements of Professional Claims. And why don't we refresh our memory just a tad bit? Because since this is a fairly complicated area. So here's my refresher, and this is the professional claims form printed here. Of course, it doesn't help that the word sample is splayed right about here in the middle. And if you see this dark line, if you see this line over here next to the S, that separates the claim header, the top part, from the claim detail. And so I've tried to put that in two sections. I've put this is my claim header part and this is my claim detail part. So one thing to note about professional claims is that these are people. They have feet. So I've put an icon of feet. And they go from place to place. So an important concept in professional claims is place of service. And it could be the office. It could be telehealth. It could be ER. It could be urgent care. It could be a skilled nursing facility. It could be the hospital, etc. So that's going to be a very important concept, place of service. And as a matter of form, in the claim header, what you'll see a lot of diagnostic information. You'll see insurance information. So there's going to be diagnosis codes. And there are many fields for the providers. Who is the billing provider? So the billing provider could be someone, could be an organization. It could be a physician group, for example. Then there's a placeholder for a referring provider. Who referred this provider? And as you know, among professional doctors, there is such a thing as like you may be referred to a specialist by your primary care. So that's there. Then who's the ordering provider? If there's a procedure listed there in your claim, then who ordered the procedure? So all that is in your header information. In your detail, you have more information about treatments. What was the treatment that was done? And each claim line, which is denoted by claim line, has the date, what procedures were provided, the charges, and who provided them. So, and this is where place of service becomes important. There's also a diagnosis pointer, and this is a way of linking the detailed information on the claim, which is about treatment, to to information about their diagnosis, which is on the header. So the diagnosis pointer is able to link to multiple diagnosis code. It's at the line level and it is able to link to multiple diagnosis codes. So you know this treatment happened, this procedure was happened on X date and it was done by Y provider, and here was the diagnosis codes it was meant to address. So now that we have this under our belt, we can go ahead and work within our Google Colab session. And as a reminder, these files are taken from the Medicare fee-for-service claims. They come from the synthetic Medicare enrollment fee-for-service claims and prescription D data, and this is the carrier data. So let's go over to Google Colab and learn about this file. For the sake of ease, I have pre-run all the cells in this file. And as before, I'm putting in my libraries at the top. I'm loading my Google Drive, and then I am creating file paths and loading some lookup files. In cell 3, I'm reading my professional file. And then, as before, I am doing some exploratory analysis on it by spitting out the columns and their types into another file. So this is the call professional. And when I peruse this file, I was able to see that the way that diagnosis on the claim header and the treatment on the claim detail was linked to each other was the line ICD diagnosis code. And this is the way that the CMS implemented the idea of the diagnosis pointer concept. And your data warehouse may have a different implementation of this. I was curious to figure out what fields have the keywords NPI. So here I have a referring provider, I have a billing provider, I have a performing provider, I have an org provider. So here I've noted down what all of this is. Next, moving on, as I mentioned, the place of service is very important. And so here I am tabulating the frequency of the place of service code. And you can see 11 is the most common, that is the office. 20 is another common one, and that is the urgent care facility. Now, this is very, very important. We need to be careful not to double count our encounters, because what will happen is, for example, you had an inpatient claim that would also come in through your inpatient file. And here an inpatient claim would come in through with a place of service code of 20, so you're professional. So if you count these as distinct encounters, you're double counting. So you want to be very careful not to double count. And you have to, when you're combining encounters from different settings, you want to be very careful not to double count. So very simplistic assumption that I'm making, and please do not make this without carefully examining pros and cons, is I'm only taking place of service code, which is equal to the office. So I just want office visits. And it's a reasonable assumption for a learning exercises to take the office visits. So you can see that how much I've gone down in my row count. And I printed out the row count both before I did the filtering and after, so I could see. Then I'm reading in my columns to their appropriate data types. One thing I was curious to do is there is no concept of length of stay here because this is a professional claim. They're not staying, but there is a claim from date and a claim through date. And professional providers sometimes bill for a whole month which might have 5 visits. So I was curious to see if the claim from and claim through covered multiple days. And I did see that there were a few that covered 2 days. But since this is such an insignificant and small part, I decided to make it easy upon myself. And I kept only the claims where claim days was strictly equal to 1. And that made my analysis easier further down. Uh, Now, what I'm trying to figure out is so I know that in my claim header, I have only 1 day listed. But what I'm curious to know is for each claim, when there is a claim line, and if the line is more than one, what I'm curious to know is what are the what do I see in the claims that have many lines? So I'm doing some exploratory analysis here. And in my prompt, I said, for each claim ID, show me the max of line number, and then filter this data set professional for 5 claim IDs with the highest line number. I was curious to see. And it actually did a very good job. It grouped by claim ID, and then it gave a max of the line number. It put that in a data frame, and it took the top 5 with the ascending is equal to false option, and then it filtered my data. So I saw that these are my top 5. And when I perused it, it appears that the performing NPI is the same on all claim lines. What I was thinking about is that for claim IDs with multiple lines, I would see the patient having encounters with different performing NPIs. But the perusal of this shows that the performing NPI is the same. And then, so I thought that I would validate that assumption by programmatically checking it out. So I wrote in my prompt for claim IDs with max of line number greater than 1. So these are the claim IDs with multiple line numbers. I want to know if any claim IDs have more than one value of performing physician NPI. And so the LLM gave me this suggested code. And I was fine up until here. And then I sort of got lost. So this is how I check my understanding of AI generated code. First, let me explain to you what the code is doing. So it's grouping by claim ID, and it's getting the line number, and it's getting the max of that. So that's fairly explanatory. Then we're filtering claim IDs where the max is greater than 1. Okay, that's fine too. Now I'm filtering the original to include only the claim IDs where the claim line is greater than 1, and that's fine too. I understand that. And now what I'm doing is um, I'm counting for every claim ID and performing physician NPI. I am counting how many performing physician NPI rows there are. And this is where I got a bit lost, why AI was doing this. So I went over here and I printed this out. Okay. And that made it easier for me to understand it. So for each claim ID, it's done. So it's grouped by 2 columns, and now it's simply counting the rows. Okay. And that's what its NPI counts is exactly that. So I didn't see how that would be much interest. And then after that, what AI is doing is it's grouping my above object, and it's grouping it by claim ID. So now it's ignoring the performing physician NPI, it's grouping it by claim ID, and then it's looking at the size. So this was actually pretty interesting because once you group it by claim ID, if there were two performing physician NPIs, the size would not be one, it would be two. So that's how I figured out that AI was doing what I wanted it to do. Um, so, and then I said, okay, now I know what the size is. If it's the size is one, then I know that the performing NPI, they're not more than one performing NPI on each line ID, um, each claim ID. So, and then I said, okay, now my assumption that line number is equal to one makes sense. I can remove my line numbers. I don't have to worry about that complexity because I know that only one performing NPI is listed. Um, and since I know that the claim from and claim through is only one day, I know that each of the header records represents one encounter and not many. So I was able to make that assumption. And after that, the rest was pretty easy and things that we have done before. I created a diagnosis file, which is a melted version. So I take the various diagnosis columns and I go from wide to long. So now I have in diagnosis, then I have everybody's um, diagnosis that were from their professional office visits. Um, I link it with the ICD diag to get the description. And then in my last step, I subset my professional data for the following fields and I drop the duplicates, if any. And these are my professional office encounters. So then I printed out my professional office encounters, and that's what I have, like Bene ID, claim ID, then the date, the principal diagnosis, what is paid, and what is the ICD. And then I will have, for this Bene ID, I will have one or many records in my diagnosis file, which will give me all the diagnosis. So I have created a little data model. And where I'm going with this, for each setting, I'll have a diagnosis file, and then I will have an encounter file. I'll put the diagnosis files together. I'll dedupe. I will make some more rules about what is a comorbidity. Maybe I will take the first three digits of the ICD and call that a comorbidity, or look up or collapse ICD into various diseases using lookups. And that's how I'm going to get to patients' comorbidities. So that's where I'm headed next, is from all their diagnosis information, from all the settings, I'm going to be creating their patient comorbidity file. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video.